Joining us now is Ian Sams, spokesperson and senior advisor for the Harris-Walz campaign. Good to see you again, Ian. Okay, so I'm curious about this, a decision to make a formal closing argument, although she has been available out there talking a lot, just took some questions in the last hour. Why a formal closing argument, and what are we going to hear?
Well, look, she sees this like the former prosecutor that she is, which is to lay out the case for the American people. She's presented all of the evidence, and now it's time to make her closing argument and crystallize the choice in this election for the voters. And I think that you heard from her right there, and you heard this last night at the CNN town hall. The vice president is making clear that voters have a real choice between two different candidates. You have a candidate who's focused on themselves, and you have a candidate who's focused on them and their needs. And that is going to be a fundamental choice for voters to make here in a few weeks when they cast their ballots. And she's going to talk about that. She's going to talk about how we have an opportunity in this election right now to finally turn the page on what has been a decade dominated by Donald Trump's division and offering the American people a hopeful and optimistic plan forward, something that they can look forward to. You see all this energy that's being brought to the table from these supporters like Bruce Springsteen, like President Obama, like Michelle Obama, who are energizing and exciting voters to get out there and finally turn the page on what we've seen from President Trump and actually pursue a new way forward as embodied by the vice president and her plans to take on issues that really matter to people.
So let's talk about that, because you talk about the positive message, and we do hear some of that, but we also hear about a Donald Trump who is unstable, unhinged, who she called a fascist. She decided to come out and speak and make some very tough points, some of the toughest I've heard her make after we heard from General Kelly and after the article that was in The Atlantic. So on one hand, she's talked from the very beginning about wanting to inject hope and joy. On the other hand, there's this very tough talk. Are we seeing a conscious strategic shift in messaging or the balance of messaging?
Well, I think that she's trying to help make sure that voters remember what a Donald Trump presidency looks like. And you don't just have to take her word for it. You mentioned it. The people who know Donald Trump best are issuing what she called last night at the CNN town hall a 911 call to the American people and saying, we were there with him. We were alongside him in the Situation Room and in the Oval Office. And this man poses a risk to our country. He does not care about you. He does not care about the Constitution. He only cares about himself. He's seeking unchecked power to do with it what he will. And just this morning in an interview with Hugh Hewitt, former President Trump said that the first thing he would do is fire Jack Smith. I mean, those are the kinds of things he's prioritizing. That's what you hear from her when she talks about an enemies list. It's just such a vastly different set of priorities than what she's offering. She's saying, let's turn the page on all that. I'm actually going to focus on you and your needs, lowering your costs, helping make housing more affordable, fixing our broken immigration system, protecting people's reproductive health care. She's outlining a real vision to help people move past all that drama from Donald Trump and actually move forward as a country. And so I think when you hear her talk about Donald Trump and you hear her talk about the risk that he poses to this country, citing his own former top officials, it's helping to remind the American people of what a Donald Trump presidency was like so that they can remember it, think about it for a second, and then choose to go in a new direction.
So early voting, Ian, is underway in a lot of the country, and I wonder what the early numbers are telling you. And importantly, what percentage of voters in these 7 key battleground states do you believe are still persuadable?
Well, look, you're right. A lot of voters have already made up their minds and they're already going to the polls. We feel really good about what we're seeing in the early vote data. For example, more than 500,000 registered Democrats have already voted in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We're excited about that. You're seeing women voting at a higher margin than men so far in early voting, and all the data indicates that Vice President Harris, of course, is doing much better among women than former President Trump is, who has his own issues with women to contend with. And we're seeing real enthusiasm out there about people who are getting the message out to their friends, knocking on doors. We've had, I talk about Pennsylvania, it's such a critical battleground state. Just this past weekend alone, we knocked on 400,000 doors in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We have a real ground game that's ready to mobilize people. And so how many were answered? Well, we knocked on 400,000. I got to be honest, I don't have the data in front of me exactly how many doors were opened. I know it's a time where people might be like, oh, why are you knocking on my doors? But it's campaign season. But when we have an actual organization that is able to reach that many homes and reach that many people across Pennsylvania, it shows a real edge that we have in this race over President Trump, who, like you mentioned in the lead into this, is sort of outsourcing some of his organization to people like Elon Musk, who don't really seem to know what they're doing. And so I think we feel really, really confident in our ground game right now, our ability to turn out voters who are maybe even not even normal voters, sporadic voters, first-time voters. We're seeing really encouraging data in the early vote of people who are sporadic or first-time voters casting their ballots for Democrats. And so we're really excited about what we're seeing in the early vote numbers. And you're going to see the vice president hitting the trail in these closing days at the finish of early voting in some states and ahead of Election Day to continue that momentum and get people out to vote.
We talked about at the top of the last hour, 3 polls out today, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, CNBC. All of them show a race that is dead even within the margin of error. Same with all 7 battleground states. So let me ask you again what you think the real number of persuadables is, what percentage of persuadables. And do you know what message is working? Because, again, according to those polls, the economic message still heavily favors Donald Trump.
Well, you talk about the economic message. I think the Bloomberg poll, for anybody who wants to dig through the data, shows some really exciting movement toward Vice President Harris on economic issues. She's continuing to have the edge over Donald Trump and who's looking out for the middle class, which is a historic marker for candidates' success in an election. So we're feeling really good about her economic message resonating, bringing down costs, making housing more affordable, things like that. But, we know this is going to be a really, really, really close race. I think that there may be a lot of people watching MSNBC right now who have that sort of nervous energy before an election. And I think people should go to go.kamalaharris.com and sign up to actually go knock doors or make phone calls in the next 13 days. I think that could make the difference. We're talking about, you asked about the number of undecided voters. I mean, we have a very small sliver of voters out there, but a consequential
2%, 3%?
But a consequential sliver of voters who, if you just reached out to 5 people and made contact and it pushed them over the edge, if 500 people did that, it could swing the entire election. And so, you have a situation right now where each candidate from either party, they'll hit 46, 47% of the vote, maybe 48% of the vote. And then you have that 4 or 5% of people who are on the fence, whether they're trying to make up their mind between Trump or Harris based on how they voted in the past, based on what issues make the most sense to them, or if they're truly undecided and they just don't know enough yet to make a choice. What we're doing is trying to reach them where they are with people who are in their communities who they trust and with people who are trusted voices in the culture and in society to say, hey, this election is really important. The stakes are really, really high and you need to go vote. And so we'll be doing that over the next 2 weeks.
Ian Sams, thanks so much for taking the time.